Hello, everyone, and good whatever moment of the day you are enjoying on your time zones, as you are here with us today, live, watching us, or simply just listening, or equally welcome and good moment of your day when you go back and listen to the recording. You can find the recording on our hackinghrlab.io platform. So today we will be spending 1 hour, one very, very short hour, as part of our May series. It's a conversation advocating for all things mental health, part of the Mental Health Awareness Month. And Enrique challenged us today with a long title. Thank you, Enrique. So, we will be talking about the art of creating a healthy organization, how to encourage everyone at work to act on mental health and create a better organization together. We are together with Jessa backstage. Thank you so very much, Jessa. Always a pleasure to be with you. And I will kindly ask you to bring our speakers on stage. In the meantime, just a very, very warm welcome to our audience. Please do drop us a short note in comments. Let us know where you're connecting from. It's always a joy to see where we touch people. And just a reminder, please do use the chat as your own conversation space and consider that all questions are equally open for all of you. So just chat away, comment, get in touch, and build this community further and further. So let's kick it off with a very short round of introduction. So my name is Minola Jacques. You can call me Hacking HR for the next hour. And I'm a journalist by trade, a change manager by choice, and a Hacking HR absolute supporter by calling. And it's always, always a joy to see all these wonderful people on my screen. So, quick round of passing the e-mic on my screen clockwise. And two quick asks. Just shortly introduce yourselves and also share with us, why is this topic important for you personally? Why did you want to be here today talking about this topic? So, Catherine, you will go first. Then, Chris, you will go last. And this is the only round when it's easy to go last. So, Catherine, welcome.
Hello, everyone. My name is Catherine Gordon. I am the Director of People and Culture at Canuck Place Children's Hospice. You can see both the hospices behind me. And mental health is obviously really important to us. Working in a hospice, we really want to take care of our staff and make sure they're both physically and mentally healthy. So excited for the conversation today.
Thank you so very much, Catherine. Stephanie, good to see you. Welcome.
Good to see you as well. My name is Stephanie Lemick. I'm a former HR executive turned consultant, and I am so excited about our conversation today because after many years of in-house HR, I know how important mental health is at work from professional experience and personal experience as well.
Thank you. Christine, good to see you. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, the audio is a little bit blurry, but let's see how we move forward.
I'll try another way in a minute. So I'm Christine Gibson, and I'm a physician and trauma therapist in Calgary, Canada. And I started engaging in TikTok a couple of years ago and started to recognize just how much people were affected by mental health, including in the workplace. So we've just created a company called Safer Spaces Training to help people develop skills around psychological safety and well-being.
Thank you. And the audio is a bit of a challenge. I don't know if it's just me or all around. So let's hope for a quick solution. And Chris, so good to see you.
Likewise. Thanks, Manola. So Chris Deaver, I had experience in HR, but really changed my role to culture and working with organizations like Disney and Apple. And now as a co-founder of a company called Bravecore, we work with small businesses right up to enterprise on their culture, and how they can shape the future of their culture in ways that make culture a place that people love, and where they want to be. And that's really core to who I am, and creating brave space for people to flourish.
Mm. We are waiting for one more speaker. I know that Jessa is trying to figure out the tech and the logistics backstage. So Jessa, when we have Sandra with us, just bring her in, and we will go agile, not fragile, and we will take it from there. As we were thinking about the conversation today, many companies, they talk about mental health. Some companies opt to have mental health under the wider umbrella of wellness and well-being. And I was wondering if we can start our conversation with talking about why should we address mental health full on, and how can we make sure that there is at least a baseline understanding across organizations about what mental health is, and how it should be addressed in a meaningful way. And what I will do, I will ask Stephanie to lead us into this round of answers, and then you all know the drill. The unmuting competition is officially open. Just build your conversation.
Perfect. Thank you. So excited to go first. I'm glad to have at least some answer for this. I think the thing about mental health is it's similar to physical health. We all have mental health. It is something that each one of us has, and each one of us should be talking about and should be considering. And I think, whether that is a discussion that it exists in the overarching concept of well-being, how we show up to work, whether that's our physical or mental health, affects all of us. So I think it's really important to normalize the conversation. I think mental health is a term that kind of gets a little loaded sometimes. People hear mental health and they think mental health challenges or struggles, but really mental health is something we all have. So, sharing healthy practices, sharing struggles, sharing challenges we've overcome, I think is really powerful. How many of us have had a conversation in the break room about a new workout or about a new diet, to support our physical health? Why can't we have those same kind of conversations about things we're doing to proactively take care of our our mental health? And I think leaders can really, set a great example here.
Thank you, Stephanie. Let's see who follows.
Yeah,
Chris.
I'll add to that. I think just that note that Stephanie ended with about leaders, taking responsibility for the mental health of people in their organization. And first, they have to care, right? And first, I'd say they have to care about their own mental health. And this has been, I think, more of a shift where leaders in the past, at times, some leaders may have sacrificed their mental health, right? I mean, I remember one of the worst case scenarios. I was coaching a leader. I'm sitting down with him, and he's arguing for a promotion. I think he was already a VP, but he wanted SVP. And he's saying, "Do you know what I sacrificed for this organization?" I said, "Well, what sacrificed?" I sacrificed my family, my wife, my kids, my life. I'm thinking, that doesn't sound like a good trade. Like, that sounds like you've really, that's a bad sacrifice. And it was unfortunate to see he had let his mental health go for the sake of this company, and this company didn't care, right? It wasn't going to promote him at that point. Now it already promoted him before, but he was in this kind of lockstep of like, that is life. And I think that's something that leaders have to break out of to begin with, right? Is to say, you know what? Life is bigger than my job and my company. There are all these elements that are so much more core, right? Family, your faith, if you have one, who you are as a person, your identity. And then if a leader can see themselves, do this kind of mirror test to understand that, then they can bring that to others and and to know that matters, right? Because it's who we are, right? We can't get around that. If we create artifice to try to pretend and fake like we don't have feelings, or we're not in pain when we are. I mean, if somebody's going through something, they've lost a loved one, you can't fake that. And if we try, then people are going to end up leaving a company, and it's not helpful. So those are some thoughts on that.
I'm happy to add to that. I would say leaders have a real role in this as well. So I think we valued working long hours and making all those sacrifices that you talked about, Chris, but really what we need to value is stepping up as a leader to say, I'm taking my vacation, I'm not contactable, setting clear boundaries, coming back refreshed, encouraging people to take their time off. You need to take the time off. One of my colleagues always says it's a marathon, not a sprint. You have to take time off. Everybody's human. I think sharing when you are struggling, if you're caring for a loved one who's ill, letting people know that you're not contactable, you're spending time with them, because by doing that, you're showing leadership and giving them permission to do the same thing. If our leaders are constantly working long hours and sacrificing everything else, we're sending that message to everybody in the organization too.
And from my perspective as a physician and therapist.
Christine, I'm really sorry, but it's not only blurry now, it has some very strange noise to it, your audio. Is there anything else that we could try? Let's see. In the meantime, I will just add something. I think it's serendipity at its best. Today is my second day of vacation. I took this week off. And when I put together my out of office automatic reply, I went with the usual, with no access to my email in case of emergency contact. And I also put, and just as we are approaching the half-year mark, here's a link to an article on the 7 types of rest. And I encourage you to be very intentional with prioritizing it and making sure you cover as many types of it as needed. And let's see, Christine, let's give it a go. It's
I'll try without the earphones. So from my perspective as a physician and therapist, obviously I'm seeing people who have identified that they have a significant challenge with mental health. And to me, I think preventative work typically includes therapy. So just advocating to make sure that there is some therapeutic prevention happening, because, rest and boundaries aren't always enough for many of us. And right now, still in the middle of a pandemic, and a lot of things have changed. We're getting more and more people identified as feeling anxious or having experienced a trauma. And I think the more that we're allowed to say, not necessarily diagnoses, but like significant symptoms that we're experiencing, the better that will alleviate the stigma, because the majority of people are identifying in that way, at least anonymously. And I think it would be really helpful if we were to help them by acknowledging how common it is and the kinds of things that we are actively doing about it.
Thank you all so much. And thank you, Christine, for trying different solutions. So happy that now we can hear you clearly. I will just take a few seconds to welcome. I saw that quite a few people joined us over the past minutes. And I would invite you to take the conversation a little bit deeper, because what we heard, just a very rich spectrum of different needs and different perceptions and different experiences. So I would really like to take a few minutes and really look into how mental health can be nurtured in an inclusive way, and making sure that it caters, to a variety of needs and journeys. And Christine, we're so happy to have you. I would ask you to lead us into this round of answers, please.
I mean, I feel like the journey is really personal, but it always does involve the workplace. So I think that like personalized solutions and personalized skill sets is really important. So you can have, company policy and saying yoga is available, or we're going to focus on mindfulness and meditation, but not every kind of avenue will be the best path for everyone's mental wellness. So I'm a firm believer in offering menus and saying, these are the things on your menu at work. What would you like to try today off your menu? And then people can kind of build their toolkit in a very personalized way. So the more that this menu is available, and sometimes the menu will need to involve, physicians and therapists and more formalized solutions, and sometimes it can be truly preventative. So I really love the idea of that menu and mental health.
So,
No,
sorry.
Stephanie.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
So I would say I absolutely love the idea of a menu and providing a variety. I think mental health is deeply personal. We all have different experiences. We kind of all have a different suitcase we're bringing with us to the workplace, and it has all those great things, knowledge, skills, experience, but it also can include lived experiences like trauma, which 70% of US adults have had one or more traumatic experience in their life. And I am a big advocate of thinking about mental health in the culture you build and in the processes and procedures, so really everyone has the ability to come to the workplace and be successful. I'm very interested and actively pursuing some research around making trauma informed workplaces more accessible, more of a reality, so folks really can be successful. And I think that's so important when we talk about mental health, when we talk about traumatic experiences, outside the workplace, inside the workplace, and how those may show up. While some people may find it very, powerful or cathartic to share those experiences, for many others, they may not want to share for whatever reason. So I think it's really important as we approach mental health that we're cautious around the ask and we make sure people know there's space to be open about our previous experiences, open about our needs. But even if you're not in a place where that is helpful to you, there are processes, there are procedures. As Dr. Christine said, there's a menu of things to help support you in your individual journey so you can show up as your best self at work.
I just wanted to add to that and share a little bit about what we're doing. I think given the work that we do, obviously we're working with children with life-limiting illnesses. What we've discovered, it isn't the work. The work is enriching, and our clinical staff, that's where they feel they're adding value. It's the repeated nature of the work and also everything else beyond that work, COVID, your family. So we offer that menu that Christine is talking about. We offer 1,500 a year in counseling. We have a health and wellness account that you can also add to counseling. We offered virtual counseling every month. We also have staff that are housekeeping and food services. And we're really trying to normalize them reaching out for help as well. That mental health, as you said, is a proactive piece too. And given the workplace that we're in, it begins from our interview process, asking how will you support yourself working here? What can we do to care for you? What networks do you have? How can we provide connection? During COVID, identifying those that were living alone and making sure they could come into the office and still have those connections with people. We offer massage on site. We offer benefits from day one. We tell new hires, if you experience a loss, this is how you can tell us during your probationary period. It won't affect your job security. We're here to care for you. My job is to look after all of the staff so they can look after everybody else. And that is deeply personal. But the piece of the healthy workplace culture that we want to look at is connection. I would, above everything else, I would say it's one-to-ones. It's checking in with your manager. It's checking in with your colleagues so they get to know you, to build that trust. So when you are going through a challenging time, you feel safe to reach out and ask for support and access those resources we have available.
So I want to work there, Catherine. That sounds pretty amazing. I love what she said. And I would just add to that, you know, we live in a time where, you know, even before the pandemic, right? We were looking at numbers that were 70% of people were already disengaged, right? We can only imagine what it's like now and how people are already feeling alone. And so this reality is really hit hard. And you know, but it's interesting how the small things, or seemingly small things, are so powerful, right? A lot, helping people feel welcome, ensuring that they have what they need. That, you know, I think of, it's really about, it's deep empathy, right? That pathos, you know, the heart as well as the mind. That these are elements, and we think about, you know, leaders have still, many still think in terms of the knowledge worker, and we're past that, right? We're in a time where people want to bring their hearts and minds to work, and they also want to feel, in some way, even, you know, connected in their soul, right, with their work, doing maybe even the best work of their lives. And so, how do we create the, you know, the environment and the culture, right, that can kind of harvest that? And I think there's some other simple building blocks that I've experienced, that I've seen leaders do, that can help with this. Among those is, you know, you mentioned, Manola, having that kind of free space or time to be somewhere, right? I trip to Hawaii. I was there for like a month, and my leaders were great with it. They say, okay, you're just, you know, be on the meetings you can, and, you know, we'll make it work. And it was an amazing experience for me and my family. And I felt, you know, cared for with the team. I actually put in a lot of effort and time. It made me want to work more, even though, I mean, granted, I was in Hawaii, so my schedule was blocked, but I had time where I'd say, okay, during those hours, I'm all in. And I produced a lot for the company, more than I would have, I think, if they would have taken this hardline stance. And I've seen, you know, leaders say, well, block your time, right, for your family, or block these things. Because we think usually about just in terms of work meetings. It's like, well, if there's things you need to do, and and I agree, therapy is powerful, right? Or those moments, right, in time where you can take it for yourself and recharge. I think the other I'd add to that is creating brave space for people, right? Reimagine meetings. Meetings don't have to be download or agenda driven sessions. In fact, that's a big turnoff for people these days. They do not want to be in a moment with a manager that has no bedside manner, or is just like straight up just telling them what they need to do. It's not the experience we want to have, right? We want to be there and be a part of something where people are sharing wisdom, there's deep empathy, and it's powered by principles of love. And I've been encouraged when I've seen leaders transform in this way, right? We're seeing this. I know a CEO, it got so bad, the trust was so broken in his organization because he was so abrasive and just brutal. It's all about the numbers, that his company started failing. Like when the downturn happened, they were failing, and they were right in the verge of bankruptcy. And he had a realization that it was existential. Like if he didn't change as a leader, their whole company was going to fail. And he was in a big all hands, 100 people in the company. He asked them, who trusts me still? 2 people raised their hands. And this is kind of an extreme example, but to tell the story, his name's Muhammad, and he has a company called Softway. He set about on a journey himself. He went to a football game, University of Houston. He's an alumni. He's watching this game, and he's struggling inside. His company's failing. He had all the fancy cars, the fancy house. He was successful, multi-million-dollar company, and now it's getting wiped out. And he's watching this game, and the team is undefeated, but they're losing by 30 points. But in the last quarter, they come back and they win. And the next day, he's wondering, like, how did they do this? Like, how did they pull this off? And then a press conference, they asked the coach, how did your team do this? And he said, they love each other. And it's love. He kept saying this word love, right? And what Muhammad realized was, wow, what if love is like actually a business strategy? Like, what if you take this and apply it to your culture? And so he wrote a book with his team called Love is a Business Strategy. And he transformed as a leader. And his company has grown since. Their attrition numbers have flipped. it's very positive now, and people love to be there as part of that culture. And I think I'm encouraged by transformation stories like that, where leaders can go from kind of a rough version of themselves to a changed version to help change the future and change people's experiences in their work. Right? We all deserve that.
Thank you so very much, Chris, for sharing this story and for bringing love into the workplace. It's a word that people still have very different, very strong reactions to within business environments. Each of you, in some way, shape, and form, you mentioned deep empathy and love and connection and trust. And I was wondering, in a reality that will be hybrid and remote moving forward, so almost counterintuitive to connection in the sense that we had at least pre-pandemic, how is this making the journey towards a healthy organization more challenging or inspiring? And Catherine, since you mentioned connection and trust, please.
So I think the virtual world offered opportunities to us. We were before a completely in-person organization across 3 locations. Now we serve across 4. So the virtual workplace means I'm able to do a huddle out at Abbotsford in the mornings and see the chef and hear what he's making and wish I was there. I'm able to understand the work more. One of the most successful things we did was actually crafting nights, where we sent people kits and they made cards with their dog and their partner and their kids online, and drunk wine or soft drink and just chatted, and it wasn't about work. And we got to meet colleagues we would never otherwise have spent time with. We're a 24/7 facility. I think it offers opportunity. I think people often focus on the negative sides of hybrid. I think it was more difficult for people, obviously, who lived alone. Our offices never closed, so people went in consistently when they were able to, if that was what they wanted. And a lot of people want to work remotely. And I think we're finding, like most places are, the soft spots in the middle. So some people want to come in 2 days a week, and we're giving them permission to have that in-person connection. So it's not about going into the office and sitting on your computer. It's about grabbing a coffee and having a chat. It's about taking a walk with a colleague. It's about seeing the dog they brought in, because we have a dog-friendly office. It's making those connections in a different way. But I'm thinking of my team. Our senior leadership team felt incredibly connected, because we seemed to spend hours and hours and hours on Zoom together, just chatting through what we could do to support staff when COVID first hit. And now we still have that connection. It doesn't matter whether it's in person or hybrid. Same with my team. We're a small team of 3. Doesn't matter if it's in person or hybrid. It's the conversations that you have. We have buddy meetings where we just talk to a colleague we don't work with and just ask them about themselves. So those connections are still building even from new hires onwards. It's about the quality of the conversation. I think Chris was mentioning, you don't want that laundry list of tasks. You have to set time aside just to ask people how their weekend was, what's their favorite movie, make jokes about what they like to eat. That's how you get those connections. So it doesn't just feel that you're there for work, you're making friends at work. I went to an in-person meeting recently with our senior leadership team, and someone commented, oh, you all really like each other. And we really do. We love our CEO. She's amazing. We love spending time with her and seeing each other, whether it's on Zoom or in person. And I think that's what makes a difference for a positive culture. And I'd say working at a hospice, you wouldn't think it's about enjoyment, but that actually is one of our highest engagement scores. People actually enjoy coming to work because of the people they work with.
I mean, Chris was already sold for coming to work, with you, but you had me at a dog-friendly environment.
Me too. That brought a smile to my face. I guess what you and Chris have mentioned in terms of this like beautiful environments and environments infused with love is not what I see on the daily basis. And maybe my perspective is skewed, but I see a lot of people who are stuck in fight, flight, and freeze, even in their workplace. So we're talking leaders, we're talking employees, we're talking customers and clients. And so a lot of the skill set that is needed isn't just kind of, some of those softer approaches around empathy and compassion. It's like actual interventions, like psychological first aid interventions when people are having a meltdown or they haven't shown up in a week and they just can't get out of bed. That's a lot of what I see and deal with. And I think there's kind of this spectrum with interventions around mental health, and the stuff that's truly preventative. I love that menu idea, but we also have to consider when things are not going well, which I think it's happening more and more lately, that people are recognizing that, this person is just really irritable all the time, and it's because they're stuck in that fight of the fight and flight energy, and they'll show up with that anger and irritability and aggression in all environments, even when it's not reasonable, or they'll show up in flight, which is sometimes not showing up at all, but it's behind things like the Great Resignation and quiet quitting. And it's people who are just saying, I can't be fully present. It's not safe for me physiologically right now. And freeze looks like just immobile, stuck, not getting anything done. So the way that our nervous systems show up in the workplace, I think, greatly affects not just us, but there's kind of a contagious nature to it, that when somebody is psychologically unwell, it's very easy for us to mirror that because we've got these mirror neurons in our brain. So we just kind of take on these postures and emotions. And I think part of mental health in the workplace really needs to provide that skill set to allow us to recognize, instead of saying, gosh, what's wrong with that person, is just, wow, what's been happening with this person? Like what's going on in their nervous system that we need to, build a plan around with them and kind of collaborate. So I love the idea of just kind of covering that spectrum for where people are at.
Yeah, just that's it's interesting. I think going back to this time we're in, right? It's pretty existential for a lot of people, and we know kind of the experience people have in life in general, but definitely at work is there's kind of a baseline of fear, right? Whether it's conscious, subconscious, fear of what they know or what they don't know, what they're experiencing outside of work, and we've all had this. Sometimes it happens on a daily basis, and for some people, it's very extreme. I mean, to Dr. Christine's point, and for leaders, right, the fear can lead to hiding behind easy answers, right? Big layoffs, big, just tough decisions. And granted, they have to make decisions for their business, but fear is never a good input, right, to create outputs, and yet we seem to have seen this become a default. And the way forward, we're told, and what we see, and it's true, is be brave, right? To get out of fear. And there's ways to do that. I think a lot of what Catherine highlighted as far as connection, these are paths to building a brave or braver culture. But the challenge, with Dr. Christine says, like, look, but people sometimes they end up just kind of braving it alone, right? And they end up feeling like they're in a wilderness, and they're told, we're told on LinkedIn and everywhere, like, hey, just optimize, right? Hacks and hustle culture. Like, it's almost like the message that underlies that is almost implying if you're not the ultimate success, or it's not glowing all the time, you're the problem, right? Like, that's the underlying theme. And it's unfortunate because the path forward beyond braving it alone is to brave it together. And that's really the transcendent point, is how do we, as a culture, as teams, as organizations, build a culture or a sense of that, right? We know in studies that Harvard's done over 80 years, people, the number one success factor in life, or for happiness and satisfaction, is relationships. So if we integrate relationships and connections into the workplace, right, how does that look? And of course, it has to start or be part of what managers can do, but it also really starts in a team, right? Where and I love what Catherine shared, and I've seen this in teams where there is a sense of love or a shared perspective that we're in this together, right? We have each other's back. And that is so inspiring and empowering, right? And so if teams can catch the vision of that, that would help a lot. And I think we all have to work together to bring that, make that possibility real. But it can definitely happen. And when it does in cultures, it's not just that it feels amazing. It actually produces some of the greatest products that we've ever seen in the world, right? iPhones, I've seen this with those teams at Apple, Pixar movies. These happen because people feel this way in those companies. It's not the other way around. It's not just like, oh, magically this product appears out of nowhere. It's like, wow, that was amazing. No. The input was this amazing team culture they had built. Then these products get produced.
So I would say, we're talking about connection, about relationships, how powerful they are. And I mean, in recent weeks, there's been, the research and call to action from the US Surgeon General around the epidemic of loneliness. And even before the pandemic, 50% of adults had measurable impacts of loneliness. And for me, I struggle a little with the remote hybrid in-person work conversation, because I think we're lumping a lot into the one situation we all experienced around the pandemic. There was a heck of a lot going on in that space outside of connection at work. And what I'm excited about, regardless of whether your work is done in person, hybrid, completely remote, is I think it really shines a light on the fact that connection, relationships, and building a culture around that has to be deliberate. That deliberate thought around how we foster that, how we foster these connections and that sense of belonging. Because I think a lot of times organizations, leaders, individuals relied on, proximity. Hey, I'm going to walk down to someone's office to create this environment. And there's so many ways to create meaningful connections. I would warn a guest, there are many, many remote first companies that make creating a culture of connection a priority, that do it a heck of a lot better than in-person companies that aren't deliberately thinking about it. So to me, that's really the crux of the conversation, is how do you make it deliberate? How do you make it thoughtful? And how do you make it part of the culture, regardless of the mode of work?
I so love the conversation, Candice, that you just dropped in this round of answers. And it's so frustrating to see that we are already in the second half of our time. So let's try to make the most of the minutes we have left. So picking up on this call to be deliberate and thoughtful and intentional, and putting it around Chris's mention of doing it together. What I really loved and what really resonated with me in the title of this panel was this part of encourage everyone. A lot of conversations, they are a little bit lopsided, towards leaders' responsibility or HR's responsibilities or HR leaders' responsibilities. So I would really invite you to talk about how can we make this a deliberate, intentional, thoughtful focus for everyone inside a company. And Chris, I'm sure you have a story.
I actually
Yes.
do. It's actually, you got me thinking about, and I think if we're talking about whether it's leaders or any person, any team, right, however we show up, and it has been a little complicated now with this question of remote, hybrid, and such. But I don't think that. I mean, I think to Stephanie's point, it doesn't really change the nature of humanity, right? We relate to each other. We can connect, and actually, it probably amplifies it, right? I've seen, we were involved in co-designing a session, and on Zoom, that anything longer than an hour on Zoom session, it can be pretty brutal for a meeting. But we partnered together with this team, and we organized it in such a way that it was about connection, right? It was about their story, right? I am from here's my story, here's the highlights of my life, here's the struggles I've had. They spent a full hour and a half, 2 hours on that. And then, there was a future perspective talking about the future, and a retrospective about the past, and actually flipped the order on those. But this is like an 8 hour Zoom session. And you'd think, like, these people it is going to be exhausting. People are going to log out. This is brutal. But it was so engaging. People were on fire. They're like, wow, this is amazing. We want to keep this conversation going. And they carried it into their staff meetings. And so I think we can potentially, reimagine. And of course, we had breaks in between. It wasn't straight 8 hours straight, but there's possibility for this. The other one, just in brief, is a leader that I met with who was struggling with this idea. And in particular, he's very introverted. He had his own lab at Apple, about 80 or 100 team members. And his philosophy was, I have my team. And I said, well, do you connect with others, across the organization? There's a lot of collaboration, co-creation that needs to happen. He's like, well, I do, but only as needed. Right. And I thought, well, how's that working for you? Because some of the feedback was it wasn't working. He said, well, yeah, pretty well. I said, well, let's fast forward, right? If you look a year, 2 years, 3 years ahead, how's this working for your team, your organization, if they're not collaborating, right? And what's the feeling? And he's like, well, okay, I can kind of get what you're saying. So all we did, very simply, was set a priority, a focus for him. And to Stephanie's point about intention, was just set aside the time, right? A half hour or an hour a week with those key people, right? Who are those key people? And then you can add more as you go. And you're building relationships with them. It doesn't have to be about an agenda, right? It doesn't have to be all these things you have to check the box and all this work. The work will organically come about, and you'll have conversations in the flow, right? It can be fluid, like water, right? Like Bruce Lee would say. And that's what it was. So he over the course of the coming year, he did that. He committed to those kinds of meetings. It changed the dynamics of not just him, but his whole organization. They started to do this. They weren't doing it before. They looked like this isolated organization. It was a total silo, right? We talk about alone, being alone and the feeling of being alone. Well, organizations have designed silos for decades. So we're living in a world of silos that are organizations that have designed this way. Not all of them. And, those that are fortunate enough to be like organization like Catherine's have broken out of that, but where you can bust the silos and connect these dots, to Catherine's point about connection, this is everything. And it is so important in the future, because then you can start to create, again, it's not just about products and services. It's the people that are powering these things, right? And just the short analogy of that I love, which is, I remember being in science class in high school, and people would say, you know what? You can't, or the teacher would say, you can't create a perpetual motion machine. Like, really? I think like, of course, being the teenager I was, I'm like, you're wrong. Maybe you can. And the way we do this to create perpetual motion, perpetual energy, is in culture. And if people are connected and building connection in the way they work together, and they feel engaged and they love what they do, well, you've got perpetual motion, and you're going to create amazing products and services. And that's just going to continue to happen.
Mic drop moment.
I love what you say about culture. And I think, talking about mental health at work, culture, it belongs to everyone. It is something that everyone actively participates in, and has to. And I will say, leaders do have to lead the way in terms of creating a space that is safe to talk about these things and safe to prioritize them. Personally, I love what the team at Mindshare Partners is doing. They're leading the way with leaders telling their own mental health stories. And I think that's really powerful. And I think, sharing widely, that kind of even transcends individual workplaces. But to speak to what individuals can do, outside of what's happening in their organization or with their leaders, find the humanity in yourself and in your team members and the folks you're working with. Like, just take a beat and think about humanity. Think about, you don't know what's going on in someone's life, and find a way to, understand, what's going on there, and recognize that. Maybe you are, work closely with the accounting department, and you notice on a call or in the office that someone seems a little, funky. Just, check in and say, hey, how are you doing? Like, is everything okay? those really small actions as an individual. I don't care if you're the CEO or if you're the intern, taking the time to care about the people you work with, to ask questions, to recognize that humanity, it's a game changer. And it'll be the biggest game changer for yourself, because, having that mental shift of thinking of each of the people you come in contact with at the heart, their humanness, it's really powerful. And it's been something for me that's been really important to focus on throughout my career.
I just wanted to follow up on what you were saying, Stephanie. So we hear from staff, we want to be kind, but we don't know what to do. We need tools and resources. So I just wanted to share some of the things we're doing. So I want to plug Mindful Employer. They have a psychologically safe leader method. It's an on-demand program where you basically do on-demand courses and you learn some of those tools and resources to have maybe what would be a challenging conversation, but it comes in a place of kindness. So we call it like loving correction. We wouldn't be talking to you about this if we didn't care about you. We want to know what's going on, why your performance has deteriorated, why we're seeing some of these behaviors. And it gives them questions and tools, articles, white papers, there's online discussion to learn together and share experience. And we have 60 staff going through that because we do believe everyone in our organization is a leader. Everyone has an impact on each other. We also offer mental health first aid. We offer resources through a wonderful organization called 10 that looks at psychological health and safety and providing that protective equipment through articles and again, resources. So we try and give people tools to have these conversations. We do annual respectful workplace training. And this year our theme was, it doesn't matter what's happening in your personal or professional life, your duty of care is to be kind to your colleagues because none of us know what's going on for anyone else. And I will share just 2 stories. I'm taking a note out of Chris's book. So one is I had someone approach me in another organization and so I got this really harsh email and they forwarded it and it was really harsh from a colleague. And they said, I'm really worried about her. So they didn't jump to a reactive response. They didn't take offense. They weren't upset. They were concerned. And when I checked in with that person, they were going through something quite serious that they hadn't shared. And I had another 2 pieces. One where a colleague said to me, are you okay? And I was like, actually, you know what? I'm going to take a wellness day because I just need a break. And it's showing up. And they knew me well enough to be able to say it. And I also was able to offer that to another colleague because I knew them. And I'm like, maybe you just need some time away. But to Christine's point too, it's not just about having this lovely culture, it's having practical support in place. We offer paid compassionate leave. We offer paid special leave for caregivers. We offer lots of paid sick time that's for physical and mental health. And we treat it in the same way. So we know you're off for a mental health issue, you get flowers. If you broke your ankle, you get flowers. We also acknowledge that there's a mental health impact on a physical injury. And we reach out and talk to you, make sure that you're all right. And it's all those different pieces that create that culture. You need practical support. You need resources as well as that theory of kindness. Just being kind to each other and assume positive intent.
What you said, Catherine, reminded me of the Ubuntu philosophy in South Africa, and according to that philosophy, if someone made a mistake or did something perceived as wrong, then they are taken in the center of the village. The entire tribe surrounds them, and for 2 days they tell that person all the good things that they have ever done in an effort to reconnect them back to their true nature. And what you shared around the loving correction, you called it loving correction, that made me think about that. Christine, would you like to add something to this part of the conversation?
Well, I think what came to mind was a lot of people were talking about resources. So because I think my mic wasn't working during my introduction. I'll just mention that I wrote a book called The Modern Trauma Toolkit. I joined TikTok early into the pandemic, recognizing that people really wanted to talk about mental health. So I now have 130,000 followers on TikTok as TikTok Trauma Doc. And a lot of what people will share with me in comments or private messages is just how much they're struggling and people don't know, or they just don't have the right skills to know, well, how do I regulate my own nervous system so I'm not vomiting before a meeting, or feeling my heart racing if I have to talk to somebody who's in power in my organization. And I thought, well, it's not that I don't do these things. I'm human too, but I have a lot of skills to share. So both my TikTok and the book, and then this company we've formed, Safer Spaces Training, is all to say, like, there are so many simple and accessible paths that somebody like me as a trauma therapist has a lot of easily available access to, but I wanted to kind of not gatekeep any of that information because it should be freely available. So I think some of the resources can be really intense and kind of beyond just a simple how are you doing? We could have people who have skills in, this is how you create delta waves in your brain, and this is how you tremor to release your sympathetic tone the way a dog or a horse does. There's actually incredible skills that are very easy to learn. You don't have to be a professional to figure that stuff out. And that's just really what I wanted to share to people, is to get those resources into the hands of folks who are needing them the most. And considering all of us are spending a third of our day in some kind of work environment, whether that's home or not, but even at home, I mean, if you're in your work situation and you're juggling childcare, or you're, not in a always conducive environment, that can really increase your stress level too. So I think just acknowledging and normalizing and validating the fact that a lot of us are walking around in stressed out nervous systems, and we might not even have the capacity to manage our own and keep regulated, nevertheless intervene with other folks. But the more skills that we have, the better we'll be able to do that collectively.
Thank you so very much for mentioning skills, because I was thinking, how can we touch on the skills that underpin the conversations around mental health and underpin our own mental health journey and experiences. So I am really, really curious, as we have been navigating the past years and especially now and looking forward, is there one particular skill that really helped you, or you would encourage people to get intentional about developing, that would be their ally moving forward?
I've got one that's really helped me, and during the pandemic and now, right, kind of throughout, but ongoing, is reconnecting with nature, especially just taking walks, and that's something that has helped me a lot. We talk about meditation. I think about it as meditative living as well, is getting to a mode of wherever you are. And I think nature helps with this, right? I go on hikes and walks. And one time I was going through a moment. I was in a valley that, like, I didn't want to talk to anybody. I felt just totally alone. And I have a good friend. He called me and he's like, "Hey, how's it going?" It's like, I don't want to talk to anybody right now. He said to me, "You need to go out and put your hand on a tree." It's like, what? I don't want to put my hand, I don't even want to be outside right now. But I went on this hike, and I've been there 100 times before, but I noticed this tree that, and I hadn't really noticed it before, but it had this effect in my being and my experience. So I put my hand on the tree, and it was like, it reconnected me, right, with nature and with this ecosystem that I'm a larger part of. And in our lives, right, how do we do this with others too, and reconnect with them? I think we talk about what's a practical skill. And the other thought with that is to add that what I've heard from the theme of what Christine just shared and Catherine, Stephanie, what you said, Manola, too, is this idea that how we connect with others and how we connect with ourselves and with things like nature, what this does. And it's really co-creative, right? Our state of being in life and what a lot of what we've seen in the business world, unfortunately, with some leaders, is very reactive, right? It's very reactive and it's very short term. And, what you just described, Manola, about that circle of, call it the circle of love. It's just like pouring light into someone that's in a dark moment is so powerful. But how often does it happen in organizations where the manager's response to this is, oh, you're sucking at your job, you're done, right? Like, or they'll call HR and like, how do we get them out of here? You're like, do you even know what they're going through right now? Have you asked? And so how do we infuse this humanity into this experience? I think it's going from being reactive and not just proactive, but being co-creative, right? Like Catherine's describing, you check in with people and you intuit, right? You discern even before they, or even if they don't, because we don't have most of us grew up in either homes or situations in life, educationally, we were never really trained like how to describe our emotions. I mean, especially, not to pick it, but like guys, like we don't usually talk about a lot of this stuff. So, but people in general, if we can look as to have each other's back like that and be an intuit, that is so powerful. People are like, wow, they're looking out for me. And yeah, I do want to take a mental health day because I'm a little pissed right now just from something else, but I'm projecting. And thanks for checking in with me, and I think people appreciate that kind of thing. And I think it goes beyond the soft, because the companies that do this well are the highest performing companies in the world.
Yeah.
Right. Today, numbers. We're talking about, Apple, Amazon. Well, no, I'm not going to say Amazon. Sorry. I'll say Microsoft. But Microsoft, the backstory of that is Satya comes in and, Steve Ballmer was running the thing into the ground culturally. And Satya changes the shape of the company culture. He hits refresh. But he learned this from his wife, Anu, and their son, who had cerebral palsy, Zane, because they spent time in empathy with him. And this whole thing transformed his company.
Thank you so very much, Chris. And emotional literacy, the ability to be able to name the most granular emotion that we feel, was something that we heard quite a lot throughout the month. Thank you. A skill that particularly resonates with you and is your ally. Who would like to go next?
I can jump in very quickly, and I will say self-awareness. I think there is power in continually working on your own self-awareness, understanding how you're showing up to a space, and if you have space to help others. We talk about it a long time, but want to make sure Dr. Christine and Catherine have a chance to chat too.
Thank you so much.
I think for me, it's invoking our natural neuroplasticity. So our brains are constantly wiring and rewiring, and we can be very deliberate about wiring them for possibility. So I teach something called affirmations, which is when you take an affirmation and you just add a what if on the front. So what if tomorrow's going to go well? What if I can do this? Instead of tomorrow's going to go great, I can do this, which sometimes feels like you're gaslighting yourself. So affirmations is one of my favorite skills.
Thank you. Catherine.
So I like to do small acts of kindness for people. It doesn't have to be anything big, but it can turn someone's day around. So during COVID, I started to make cards and I send them out to people to acknowledge something they're going through or positive things. And staff really appreciate that. It's just that small moment that you thought about them. It doesn't have to be big, but it makes you feel good and makes somebody else feel good too.
Thank you so very much. And Christine, what you said, there's I saw it as a post on social media. So I'm really sorry. I don't know how to properly quote it, but the dialogue between a mama bird and a baby bird, and the baby bird is like, oh, but what if I fall? And the mama bird says, oh, darling, but what if you fly? So thank you so very much, Catherine, Stephanie, Christine, and Chris for being here. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time and the curiosity and the headspace to join us today. Jessa, thank you for all your wonderful help backstage. And I encourage everyone, go back and listen to the recording. I will definitely listen to it in the future. Follow us either on hackinghrlab.io or on LinkedIn. We have a lot of good stuff coming still in May, but June, July, and beyond. And I would just like to wrap up, reminding everyone of what we heard today. So I particularly enjoyed the meditative living. Thank you, Chris. And the self-awareness. Thank you, Stephanie. I loved the wiring for possibility from Christine, and Catherine, you brought us home with small acts of kindness. So enjoy whatever comes and reconnect to nature and your nature. Thank you so very much, and hope I will get to see you again tomorrow.